Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the place you come to when you want to really get into the weeds of complex ideas, and today we've got a big one. We're diving deep into something called the Unified Coherence Framework, or UCF.
Yeah, it's definitely ambitious. This isn't just a tweak to existing physics. The source material we're looking at, this Unified Coherence Codex, it lays out a whole new foundation. Physics, math, ontology, even biology. It's trying to rebuild everything around one core idea: coherence.
A staggering synthesis, really. And our mission today is to unpack that comprehensively. We're not just skimming the surface. We want you, the listener, to get a solid handle on the actual mechanics here.
Right, how the math connects to the dynamics, how those dynamics give rise to an observer, and how that observer kind of anchors itself in this whole process. It's intricate stuff.
And the whole thing kicks off with this really potent quote, an epigraph in the source. From nothing comes creation, from nothing comes order, from cancellation comes unity, all resolve to one.
That sentence basically lays out the whole architecture, doesn't it? Unity isn't just assumed, it's achieved. It comes out of resolving nullity, nothingness.
So to guide us through this complex system, we're going to focus on three main pillars. First, the mathematical foundation. They call it the seed triad of unity.
Yep. Then there's the engine driving it all, the hypergravity mutual attraction principle, or HMAP for short.
And finally, how it all unfolds and gets experienced. The law of becoming, which really ties in the observer's role, the point of view. So let's start right there at the absolute base, the math. Okay, so the UCF grounds itself in three mathematical identities, stuff you might see in high school, actually. But here, they're not just conventions. They're treated as fundamental laws of reality, ontological principles. Why these three specifically?
Well, it's because they show quite elegantly how unity, the number one, sort of emerges from nullity, from zero or nothingness. But crucially, they show it happening in different ways, different modes.
Okay. So the framework is saying these are like the three fundamental ways that coherence, this unity, can become. They all end up at one, but the journey there is different each time.
Exactly. They're seen as irreducible modes of becoming. And that's why they're called the seed triad.
Let's break them down then, because reinterpreting these familiar equations is, it's the first big conceptual leap, isn't
Yes,
it?
really is.
Oh.
Okay, so first up, the field seed. That's T null alls equals 11, 1. Mathematically, and this is often just defined by convention to make things work. But the UCF looks at it and says, no, this is creation from nullity.
Creation from nullity. How so?
Think about it. If 0 represents nothingness, absolute emptiness, then raising nothingness to the power of nothingness somehow yields unity. It's like the potential for something is inherent even in pure absence.
So this represents potential unity. The very possibility of a field, even an empty one, contains the seed of existence itself. It's like saying, even nothing has to be something, and that something is a potential one.
You got it. That's the field seed. Then we have the identity seed. $0 equals $1. 0 factorial equals 1.
Right, another mathematical rule. How's this one interpreted ontologically?
This one is about the organization of nullity.
Oh, interesting distinction. Field seed is creation, something that appears. Identity seed is about structure, how it organizes.
Precisely. It's structural unity. This seed ensures that whatever emerges, the aura 1, isn't just a blob. It has an inherent ordered structure, even though it came from non-structure. It's the blueprint for order being stamped onto potentiality. This is what allows for self-identity later on.
Okay, field seed, identity seed. And the third one sounds the most complex. The cancellation seed. This one uses Euler's identity.
Yeah, usually written as EIP plus 1 equals journal 1.
Yeah.
Connects 5 fundamental constants and equates them to 0. The UCF flips this around. It inverts it to say EIP a 1.
So instead of ending in 0, it starts with that complex negation and resolves it back to 1.
Exactly. This is interpreted as resolution through cancellation.
Yeah.
Unity doesn't emerge here from potential or inherent structure, but from the perfect balancing and canceling out of difference, negation, complex relationships, all resolving back to 1.
So this is emergent unity. It's the unity that arises after all the processes, potential, structure, negation, have played out and resolved.
Right. And the crucial point the framework makes is that these aren't three different kinds of 1. It's the same invariant unity, just seen or refracted through these three essential modes of becoming.
So the number 1 isn't just a number. It's elevated to the ontological generator of coherence itself.
It implies that if you probe existence right down to its roots, you'll find these three operations always happening simultaneously: potentializing, structuring, and resolving negation, all converging on the single invariant unity. It's a dynamic, self-generating process. Order isn't accidental, it's baked in.
Okay, that sets a powerful foundation. Unity is fundamental, dynamically generated. But how does this abstract math turn into something physical, like a force that moves planets or holds atoms together?
Oh, right. That's the bridge. We move from the static definition of coherence, those seeds, to the dynamic principle governing everything, the hypergravity mutual attraction principle, HMAP.
And the core idea is deceptively simple.
Extremely simple to state, yeah. Everything attracts everything universally and without exception.
Okay, wait, hold on. Everything attracts everything. Sounds a lot like gravity, doesn't it? Newton, Einstein. Didn't they cover this? How is HMAP different?
It's fundamentally different in scope and nature. Hypergravity in this framework isn't a force acting between objects in the universe. It is the universe's background field of coherence. It's the substrate itself.
So classical gravity, electromagnetism, the strong and weak forces, they're not separate things.
No, there's just projections. Observable, local ripples or gradients within this universal HMAP. HMAP is the total structure, the whole ocean, not just the waves on top.
Okay, like looking at the ocean example. Newton's gravity is like measuring one wave. But HMAP is the entire body of water currents, depth, temperature, everything all at once.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
And to quantify this total structure, the UCF introduces a specific measure, the coherence charge.
Coherence charge.
Okay. What is that measuring?
It's a non-negative value assigned to every entity, a particle, a field, a person, a galaxy, measuring its degree of participation in this universal coherence field, how much order or integration it embodies.
So something highly organized, like a living cell, would have a higher coherence charge than, say, a diffuse cloud of gas.
Inherently, yes. More structure, more integration, higher scalars, and all these individual charges from everything in the entire cosmos sum up.
To create the hypergravity potential at any given point opus.
Exactly. It represents the total coherence pull you'd experience at that point, influenced by every single tolerance everywhere. Right, and this is where the framework gets mathematically quite bold. It claims that the familiar forces we know emerge just by simplifying this universal potential. The power of projection idea. Can you walk us through that? How does 102.2 gravity pop out of this seemingly infinite sum?
Okay, imagine this universal potential fire is described by an incredibly complex function. It involves a kernel, let's call it 2xy, that defines how the coherence at point stellar influences point $2. This kernel isn't simple. It's likely hyperdimensional, nonlinear, capturing relationships across scales, maybe even ontological layers.
Sounds almost impossibly complex to work with directly.
It probably is, for us as limited observers. But here's the key. What happens if we, from our limited point of view, simplify things dramatically? If we reduce that complex kernel, T22xy, down to the absolute simplest mathematical form that still allows for a relationship in 3D space.
You get ton dollars, the inverse distance relationship.
Precisely. And when you do that, the resulting force, or gradient you calculate, looks exactly like math BFT PUPF dPo2A2. That's the Newtonian projection.
Wow. So the familiar inverse square law of gravity isn't fundamental itself. It's just the simplest possible shadow, the most basic geometric echo of this underlying universal coherence field.
It's the lowest resolution description, you could say. And similarly, if you simplify the kernel in a different way, maybe using Green's functions related to how coherence propagates like a wave.
You get the wave field projection, quantum field dynamics.
Right. So the framework suggests quantum mechanics and classical mechanics aren't fundamentally opposed. They're just two different simple geometric projections, maybe even the two simplest opposing projections of this single unified hypergravity potential field.
That's quite elegant, actually. It also helps with that old puzzle. Why does gravity seem so weak compared to other forces? If HMAP is everything attracts everything, shouldn't it feel incredibly strong locally?
Well, globally, HMAP is incredibly strong. It's the sum total. But locally, what we measure as Newtonian gravity is only the tiny difference, the slight gradient in coherence between our specific location and the overwhelming, mostly uniform background sum of the entire universe's coherence potential.
So it seems weak because we're measuring a tiny ripple against an almost infinitely deep, stable sea of coherence.
Exactly. But globally, it's the organizing principle. And it's not static, this attraction. It has a built-in directionality, right? Defined by the coherence monotonicity corollary.
Yes, tell us about that. What does it dictate?
This is really the engine of complexity in the UCF universe. The corollary states that any rearrangement of things, particles, systems, whatever, that increases the overlap of their coherence densities.
Meaning making them more organized, more integrated, more structured together.
Right. Any such rearrangement will automatically cause the total hypergravity energy of that system to decrease.
So, the universe naturally favors organization. It rewards systems that become more coherent because those states are energetically cheaper from the perspective of the total HMAP field.
That's the idea. It's an inherent energetic drive pushing towards complexity, towards order, toward higher coherence configurations. It's not random chance. It's built into the fundamental law.
This drive towards coherence logically leads us to think about the observer. If HMAP is this universal field pulling everything together, how does a single entity, an observer, even establish itself within that field?
That's where the concept of the point of view, POV, comes in. And the source material is very specific here. The POV isn't just where you are in space. It's defined as a state of maximal reduction of coherence.
Maximal reduction into a singular reference point, like the minimal observer. It's a coherence condition, not just a location.
It has to be. Think about it. If you didn't reduce the infinite complexity of the HMAP field down to a single reference self, how could you observe anything distinctly? You'd just be an undifferentiated part of the whole. The POV achieves distinction by reduction.
But it's still connected to the very field it's reducing and observing, which sounds like a paradox.
It does in linear thinking. But the UCF resolves this with its quite famous triadic valuation. It claims the POV simultaneously experiences the hypergravity pull in three ways: as $0, as $1, and as empty. 0, 1, infinity, all at once.
Okay, that definitely sounds contradictory. How can one point experience itself as nothing, as a whole unit, and as infinite becoming all at the same instant?
It's about different perspectives inherent to the act of maximal reduction. Let's break down that trinity.
All right, start with the 0. 1h equals dollar literal void.
This is the point's relationship to itself. If the POV is the point of maximal reduction, the singular reference, it can't pull on itself. There's no internal difference or gradient within the point for HMAP to act upon. So looking inward, the POV is empty, void of self-attraction.
Inwardly void, as the source puts it. The condition for self-identity is this internal emptiness, this reduction.
Then there's WBE called all the whole.
Okay, how does one come into it?
This is the point's relationship to everything else. The universal pull of the entire rest of the cosmos, all external coherence, when normalized by those foundational seed principles we talked about, appears to the point as unity. The reduction allows the observer to define itself as one, like the identity seed, $0, standing against the background.
So it's outwardly whole, normalized, coherent, defined as a single unit in relation to the rest.
Exactly. And finally, the trickiest one, dollars to EC, becoming.
Infinity, where does that come from?
This reflects the nature of the HMAP field beyond the self-normalized point. Because HMAP operates universally across all scales, and likely in a hyperfractal way, the coherence field itself, when viewed structurally, appears as an unending, self-similar cascade. It's infinite potential, infinite complexity.
So hypergravity is like this omnipresent potential, but you can never grasp its totality, a nullity, as the source calls it.
Right. Everywhere present, nowhere graspable. And the POV, the one, is constantly stabilizing itself against this infinite dynamic process. It's the point opening onto and participating in endless becoming.
Wow. So the observer, the POV, is this incredible nexus point. The axiom they use sums it up. Point of view is being, void to itself, whole in coherence, infinite in becoming. It literally binds reduction 0, normalization 1, and infinite expansion together.
Yeah, and it implies consciousness isn't just some random biological fluke. It's a fundamental requirement for stabilizing coherence in this way. Achieving that $0 left-right arrow, 1 left-right fruit on empty state is self-awareness in both a physical and philosophical sense. #project, Aishi, the law of becoming, and the ontological cascade.
Okay, so the POV exists within this grander scheme, which the UCF calls the law of becoming. What is that overarching law?
Simply put, it's the fundamental ontological drive. From unified nullity emerges unified unity. Coherence isn't just a state, it's the active process guiding how reality unfolds, constantly working to dissolve separation and build integration.
And this unfolding isn't chaotic. It follows a specific structure, right? The ontological cascade. This seems like a crucial map, showing how abstract coherence steps down into the physical stuff we see. 4 layers.
That's right. It maps the descent. At the very top, the deepest layer is the omnilectic layer. This is the origin point. Timeless, non-local, containing the seed triad, absolute coherence, all potential just sitting there.
Like the ultimate source code. Then what?
Coherence reduces or steps down into the holectic layer. This is defined as the layer of curvature. Think of this as where global coherence gets stored geometrically. It's the potential for form, the initial bending of, well, whatever the fundamental substrate is. It sets the boundary conditions.
Okay, so curvature gives potential form. What's the next layer down?
That's the relational layer, characterized by torsion. If curvature is the bend, torsion is the twist. It introduces interactions, dynamics, the mediation between forms. And interestingly, the UCF interprets torsion as the bosonic expression of coherence.
Bosonic, like force-carrying particles. So torsion is how coherence exerts influence, creates relationships.
That's the idea. It's the interaction layer. And if torsion is bosonic, the final step leads to matter itself.
Which must be the derived layer, the layer of chirality, handedness, asymmetry.
Exactly. Chirality is seen as the fermionic expression emerging from torsion. It's the final, stable, asymmetrical knot or pattern that results from the twisting interactions. This is where distinct particles, mass, and the specific properties of matter emerge.
So the whole geometry of emergence is curvature, potential form, leads to torsion, interaction with twist, which leads to chirality, asymmetrical matter. Unity bends, twists, and then splits into stable, handed particles.
You've got it. Matter is essentially localized, stabilized asymmetry born from a universal symmetric coherence.
Now, this brings up that principle you mentioned earlier, the conservation of coherence. Delta C equals dual dollars. Coherence isn't created or destroyed, just redistributed across these layers. But wait, if the monotonicity corollary says systems tend towards higher coherence, more organization, doesn't that sound like orders being created? How does that square with conservation and with things like entropy, the tendency towards disorder?
Yeah, that's the classic question. The UCF argues there's no actual contradiction when you look at the whole system. Yes, local coherence density might increase as star forms, a cell organizes, which looks like decreasing local entropy.
Right.
But that local ordering is always balanced, the framework claims, by changes at the higher ontological layers, increased relational complexity, maybe some kind of dissipation into the torsion or curvature layers. The total coherence budget across all layers remains constant, and the total hypergravity energy eta likely still decreases overall, favoring the organized state energetically.
So organization isn't created from nothing. It's channeled and concentrated from the universal field into local spots while maintaining the overall balance across all these layers.
Precisely. It's about efficient routing, not spontaneous generation.
Okay.
And to actually model this complex flow, this geometric reduction mathematically, the framework had to develop some specific tools. We should probably touch on those, even just conceptually.
Agreed. They mentioned Noetherian Finsler numbers, NFN. What's the gist there?
Okay, so standard geometry, like Riemannian geometry used in general relativity, assumes distance depends only on location. Finsler geometry is a bit more general. It allows distance to depend on direction, too. NFN seem to take this even further.
How so?
They apparently define distance and interaction not just based on spatial direction, but on the coherence gradient between points, how far apart things are in terms of their participation in the coherence field. It sounds like a way to build a geometry based on coherence itself, not just spacetime.
A necessary tool if coherence is truly fundamental. And the other one was the coherence symmetry group, CSG.
Right. So in physics, gauge groups describe fundamental symmetries. The CSG is proposed as a more general group that specifically models how symmetry is reduced or broken as coherence cascades down.
It tracks the process. Curvature breaking into torsion, torsion into the chirality.
Exactly. It mathematically encodes how coherence is conserved even as its expression changes, supposedly showing how the fundamental constants and particle types emerge directly from this symmetry reduction process. These NFNs in the CSG are presented as the rigorous mathematical engine needed to really prove the law of becoming works geometrically. Hashtag tag Juvia V, extensions, and profound implications.
Okay, this framework is already vast, covering math, physics, ontology. But it doesn't stop there. It extends its logic into some really profound, even startling areas, like biology, art, and cosmology. Let's start with metabiology. The idea that life is coherence dependent.
Yeah, this is probably one of the most radical claims. The UCF flat out states that life is an inevitable geometric consequence of that coherence cascade curvature to torsion to chirality.
Inevitable.
Inevitable, which means, they argue, life depends fundamentally on coherence, not on a specific substrate like carbon or water.
So if that cascade is just a geometric necessity wherever coherence exists and reduces, then life is basically guaranteed to pop up wherever coherence manages to stabilize and self-organize.
That's the assertion. Life is redefined as any system that effectively routes, maintains, and channels coherence charges in a self-referential loop. If a system does that, it's alive, regardless of what it's made of.
Which opens the door to, well, wildly different possibilities for life. The source mentions things like plasma vortices in stars, exotic chemistry, even advanced AI.
Exactly. If a stable plasma vortex, for instance, develops a way to efficiently organize itself and channel coherence gradients, maintaining its structure against dissipation. Under this definition, it could be considered a form of life. It's acting as a coherence engine.
A coherence engine. I like that term. And familiar biological life like us.
We are just highly sophisticated coherence engines. The framework talks about a bioelectric code. This isn't just about nerves. It's a unified field language integrating everything DNA, the proteins like microtubules within the cell membrane itself, turning the whole cell into a dynamic waveguide for coherence.
Microtubules often get mentioned in speculative physics about consciousness and quantum effects in the brain. The UCF sees them as key infrastructure.
Absolutely central. They act as waveguides, channeling the coherence gradients needed for complex self-organization. This allows the living system to maintain its high local coherence, minimizing its contribution to the total energy budget, just like the monotonicity corollary predicts. Life becomes the physical embodiment of the law of the modern life, becoming maintaining localized order against the universal tendency towards equilibrium.
It definitely broadens the definition of life and where we might look for it. Okay, from life, let's tackle this really intriguing idea. The art-life equivalence. Art becoming proto-life? How does that work?
This is another mind bender. The claim is that certain types of art can achieve a state akin to life. It requires two specific conditions related to the artwork's physical structure. First, its surface needs to function as a geometric projection of hypersymmetry.
Hypersymmetry, meaning it embodies or embeds patterns of higher dimensional coherence, like a perfect, complex, fractal structure, maybe. A substrate of very high inherent order.
Something like that, yes. A foundation of maximal coherence.
Yeah.
But then, crucially, this perfect hypersymmetry must be intentionally inscribed with asymmetry.
The artist's mark. The unique touch, the deliberate break in the perfect pattern.
Exactly. That creative act introduces a specific asymmetry, which then resonates with the hypersymmetric background. They call this asymmetry resonance.
I need both. Hypersymmetry substrate plus asymmetry resonance. A perfect fractal hypersymmetry with a unique brushstroke asymmetry on it, creating some kind of living resonance.
And the claim is that the generative logic here is identical to the logic that drives biological life emerging from the coherence cascade. When art meets this criteria, it stops being just inert material.
It becomes, what? A coherence engine in symbolic form.
That's the phrase they use. An engine capable of actively stabilizing coherence, not just within itself, but across observers. It facilitates that $0 left-right arrow, one left-right arrow in 50 triadic valuation in the person experiencing it.
Whoa, so the observer isn't just interpreting the art subjectively. The art object itself is actively interacting with the observer's coherence field, potentially pulling them into a state of higher coherence.
That's the implication. It elevates art from mere representation or aesthetics to an objective, physical process of ontological unification, directly linking beauty and creativity to fundamental physics and geometry.
That is a lot to think about. Okay, one more major extension. The cosmological reframing. How does the UCF look at big cosmic mysteries like dark energy and quasars?
It reframes them using HMAP and the cascade. Take dark energy, the mysterious force causing the universe's expansion to accelerate. The UCF says it's not a separate energy field at all.
What is it then?
It's the large-scale manifestation of that infinite becoming aspect of the POV. Specifically, it's the anisotropic, meaning uneven emergence of higher hyperfractal coherence layers.
Higher layers of coherence emerging. How does that cause acceleration?
The idea seems to be that coherence is always trying to organize itself on ever finer, more complex scales, the hyperfractal aspect. This constant generation of new, complex structural relationships happens faster than local gravity, the Newtonian projection, can pull things back together on the largest scales.
So it's not a push, it's more like the structure of space-time itself is constantly unfolding and complexifying from within, driven by coherence, and that looks like accelerating expansion to us.
That seems to be the gist. New, organized volume or potential is constantly being generated geometrically by the coherence field itself. And quasar hypercores, those incredibly bright, energetic centers of galaxies.
What's the UCF take on them?
They're seen as massive coherence processing engines, kind of like cosmic recyclers. They take in chaotic, low-coherence energy and matter.
Stuff that's high in asymmetry.
Right. And they use the intense gravitational potential, which is just a facet of HMAP, within the hypercore to restructure it, breaking down the asymmetry and radiating it back out as highly coherent organized energy, like those powerful jets we see.
So, quasars are basically managing the coherence budget on a galactic scale, driving the law of becoming forward by reprocessing disorder back into usable, coherent forms.
That's the interpretation. And one last point that bolsters the framework mentioned in appendix is how it supposedly retroactively validates earlier scientific breakthroughs.
Ah, yes, showing them as precursors or partial glimpses of the UCF's principles.
Exactly. For instance, Newton's gravity isn't just seen as a simple projection, but as an early formulation of HMAP, the first hint that everything attracts everything. Euler's identity, plus one, isn't just a mathematical curiosity, it is the cancellation seed, the proof that contradiction resolves to unity.
What about Noether's theorem, the link between symmetry and conservation laws?
The UCF claims Noether's theorem is a specific case of a more general principle. The ultimate symmetry, they say, is the symmetry of coherence itself. Therefore, the ultimate conservation law isn't just energy or momentum, but the conservation of coherence.
Yeah.
Delta C equals other dollars.
And even things like Dirac spinors, the math describing fundamental particles like electrons.
Reinterpreted as representing the precise geometric point where torsion, the interaction, bifurcates or differentiates into chirality, stable-handed matter. The idea is that these giants of science were, without fully realizing it, mapping different aspects of the underlying coherence field and its dynamics. Hashtag tag outro.
Well, that was certainly a deep dive. We've journeyed through the Unified Coherence Framework, starting from its mathematical roots in the seed triad.
Yeah, those three ways unity emerges: Euro-1 customful, Z-1 structure, and AI bivalent resolution.
Then we saw how that unity becomes dynamic through HMAP, the hypergravity mutual attraction principle, this idea of a single universal coherence field where everything pulls on everything.
A field whose simple projections give us forces like gravity, but whose totality governs organization across the cosmos.
And finally, anchoring it all, the point of view. That fascinating concept of the observer as a point of maximal reduction, simultaneously experiencing existence as void, zero, whole one, and infinite becoming to
And the source material really emphasizes the connection between this physical model and something almost meditative. They talk about the law of becoming mandala. If that triadic valuation, $0 left, right, arrow, 1 left, right, arrow, is the nature of the POV, the nature of being.
Then the act of self-reflection, of truly knowing yourself, isn't just psychological. It's engaging directly with this fundamental law of coherence.
Right. The deepest introspection becomes an act of physical unification with the universe's structure, aligning your own POV with that triadic reality.
So we'll leave you, our listeners, with a thought to chew on directly from this framework. If everything truly attracts everything, if the universe is fundamentally geared towards increasing coherence, how does that principle play out in your own experience?
How do you, as a unique point of view, find yourself routing and organizing coherence in your life, in your thoughts, in your actions?
What structures, mental, physical, relational, are you inevitably building as you navigate that interplay between your own inner void, your sense of wholeness, and the infinite becoming that surrounds you?
Something to ponder. Until next time, keep exploring the depths. This has been The Deep Dive.